It is time for another episode of the Being Formed podcasts. My name is Adam. I'm the host of the show, and I'm excited about this episode because I get to introduce you to Mindy Caliguire. Mindy is a good friend of mine, and she is the founder and the president of Soul Care, an organization that exists to cultivate soul health among leaders and those they serve. So Mindy and her team work with Christian leaders in ministry and in the marketplace, serving individuals and organizations all around the world and through the Soul Care Collective, which is an online community. I would encourage you to check out soulcare.com and see what Mindy and her team have put together in terms of resources to help you and your team really take care of your souls and in the context of a healthy team. So Mindy is ready to help you and you guys flourish any way that she can. I'm a part of her spiritual directors team, so I believe in this ministry very much. I believe in Mindy and Jeff, her husband, and Jeff is big into transformational coaching. I did my studies and my coaching certification through him, and so I really, again, I'm excited about the Caliguires and the ministry they're putting out into the world. And so I get to give that to you today, dear listener. So I hope that you'll tune in to this conversation because it really focuses on Mindy's newest book. Her book, it was published by Nav Press, and it's only been out a couple months, and it's called Ignite Your Soul. The subtitle is When Exhaustion, Isolation, and Burnout Light a Path to Flourishing. So my question I'm holding out to you as you listen to this, to really consider, do you want to flourish? Imagine Jesus coming to you just like he did to so many people, saying, do you want to get well? What do you want me to do for you? These questions of deep desire. And that's a question I would hold out for you as you listen. What do you want? Do you want to flourish? Do you want your soul to come alive in the presence of God and recognize that God is with you in your midst right now, right this very moment? That kind of kingdom living can be yours. But you know what? You got to want it. So why don't we listen into the conversation with Mindy Caliguire? Well, Mindy Caliguire, thank you so much for being here on the Being Formed podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I've been looking forward to it.
I am so glad to see you. We live in the same city, although on opposite sides of the city. So this is good. We get to connect via Zoom. I want to ask you two questions as we get started. How are you doing? And a deeper question, how is it with your soul?
Oh, I love it. What a great question. I love those questions. How am I doing is good. I have, as is often the case in my life, I'm pushing big projects forward that I don't really know for sure how they're all going to work out. And so there's a lot of risk and a lot of faith and trust and discernment. God, are you in this? Are we doing the right thing? You know, we have that whole big property we're looking to develop. So there's some of that. And then there's, of course, what we're doing with Soul Care. And as a result, there's a lot of things that can bang around my head in the middle of the night. It's true for, I'm sure, everyone.
Yeah.
Or everyone I talk to, it seems to be true for. And so just in the watches of the night, in the middle of the night, to be able to report to you now, I woke up and I have all the thoughts and I'm just drawn to different scripture, different prayer, different ways to just rest my soul once again in God. It doesn't change the outward circumstances, but, and so I woke refreshed. I felt really rested this morning, and I'm still on my first cup of coffee, so I might need a refill at some point. But it's just been a lovely way to, like, I had a very long conversation last night with some friends. Jeff and I were there, and it's like we're pushing forward into uncharted territory, and we're moving in faith, and it doesn't always look very logical. And there's a certain logic to it. And yet when you look back over your history, it's like, this is the only way I have learned to be. And I can't guarantee outcomes, but I can see the signposts and keep moving. And so anyway, that was a very long-winded answer. I'm well. It is well with my soul. My soul, praise be to God, not because I was smart, but my soul has learned over many years to rest in God in the middle
Mm-hmm.
of whatever crazy is going on. And there's
Mm-hmm.
usually a fair amount of crazy, some self-inflicted, but many just things in the environment that we're in. And so, yeah, I'm well. It is well with my soul. How about you? How is your soul today?
My soul is good. We were talking before I hit record about how I made the mistake of going down a rabbit hole on a social media site today that will remain unnamed. But I did notice that that took my soul into a bit of turmoil. And I noticed that it was about 2 or 3 hours ago before this conversation. And I'm glad that I noticed. I'm glad that I was able to notice that, if it's like a jar of river water or something, that it got shook
Yeah,
up a little
yeah,
bit,
yeah,
So I love the message of rest that we're going to talk about today. And I feel like it's really pertinent for such a time as this, because I probably uh, do what a lot of others do. I don't necessarily mean to do this, Mindy, but uh, I start veering off of a kind of a centered, at home, peaceful place.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's about my own circumstances. Other times it's about what I see happening in the world around us.
Yep.
Sometimes it's kind of the state or the health of what I see happening, even in the church.
Mhm.
And, in our kind of political landscape, it's just a lot of things I notice. I'm thankful, I think. My soul feels thankful that I'm getting better at picking up on those signs of like, oh, this doesn't feel good. I would like to move away from this as quick as
Yeah.
possible.
This is
And
called desolation,
yeah, this feels like desolation.
agitation.
Yeah, yeah. And I recognize I have that power, that ability to kind of move away from that.
Yeah.
And as I say that, I'm thinking as people will hear this conversation, a lot of pastors, a lot of ministry leaders, uh, they will have to, I think, contend with what I just said a bit. Like, what kind of freedom do we all have to move in and out of places that feel like desolation?
Yeah.
I think in some people's current situations in church, they feel like they're walking through all kinds of landmines and fields of just
Mhm.
like everything feels intense, and
Yep.
every conflict is just kind of, or conversation feels like it's ripe for conflict, right? And so noticing, I think, how is your soul in the midst of these very hard times, I think is
Mhm.
important for leaders to do a little bit of introspection and, well, rest
Mhm.
so that we can recover.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I'm going in a lot of ways, but maybe I'm kind of painting a picture for where I'd like
Yeah.
to take this conversation.
Yeah. Love it. Yeah.
So, in fact, I'd like to start with the end in mind. You wrote a book. It's out now. It's a phenomenal book. I got it right here in my hand. Ignite Your Soul: When Exhaustion, Isolation, and Burnout Light a Path to Flourishing. I want to start with the end in mind. I want to start with this flourishing piece, this vision
Right.
of flourishing. Like, I I think you hold out this question throughout the whole book. Like, do you want to flourish? Like,
Mhm.
do you want to? If that's what you want, there are ways that you can partner with God in the
Yeah.
flourishing of your soul. It's not
Yeah.
easy, you say, but we didn't
Yep.
sign up for easy. So I want to just talk about what flourishing looks like to you. How
Yeah.
would you define that?
Yeah. There's a lot of great research out there on the concept of flourishing. So there's a Harvard Flourishing Project that has been looking at this at a very like population level, and really smart people are doing great work in this field. Baylor's been involved in that, and my former employer Glue and Barna. Like there's a lot of really smart people coming around this at a very deep level, which I appreciate, and I would consider myself at least aspiring to be a student of and to represent
Mm,
those findings well.
mm,
But when I think about flourishing, I love thinking about the biblical notion of shalom.
mhm,
And shalom is not, we think of it as peace. It's often translated peace, and that is true, but shalom is a much bigger idea than like an absence of interpersonal conflict. Like we
Mm-hmm.
think of peace as like peace between two people who might be disagreeing,
Mm-hmm.
and which is still important. We want to be peacemakers. We want to be bearers of peace, carriers of peace, even. But peace from a biblical shalom from a biblical notion is a much more broad concept than just a lack of interpersonal conflict. And what it starts to conjure up is this massive, like the way things ought to be.
Mm-hmm.
And you may know there's just a great little tiny book by a theologian named Cornelius Plantinga. I think that's how you say his last name. That is called Not the Way It's Supposed to Be.
Mm-hmm.
And the subtitle is that it's a breviary of sin, which
Mm-hmm.
makes it sound about as appealing as, like, it's not exactly your first choice on the titling. But I got to tell you, that tiny little book makes you so hungry for shalom. You've probably
Mm-hmm.
read it as well, but it makes you so hungry. And the title of one of the chapters, early chapters in it, is called The Vandalism of Shalom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if we have shalom is this massive idea of flourishing almost in every dimension of life, there's the fullness of how we are vocationally. Are we fulfilled in our work? Do we have enough resource? Is there a sense of enough in our life?
Mm-hmm.
It touches on all these dimensions. Yes, is there peace between us and other people? You would think, some people have a shalom framework of like restored relationship with God, with others, with
Mm-hmm.
self, and with creation. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
lots of ways of thinking about this, but to think that the vandalism of shalom
Yeah.
is what we think of as sin. It's like a breviary of not the way it's supposed to be. Shalom, in the end, this author is saying, is what God created, how we were meant to function in
Mm-hmm.
the created order of the living God, who is full of love and life and provision and purpose and all these things. So
Mm-hmm.
shalom, I think of flourishing is sort of like the capacity to engage all those different things.
Yep. Yeah. And so that's outside and it's within, right?
Both. Yeah.
Yeah.
Inner peace. When we think
Mm-hmm.
of like the capacity for, and this is a huge thing that I've been thinking a lot about in recent months. What did Jesus say so often? He would breathe on the disciples and say, peace be
Mm-hmm.
with you. He could literally walk through walls and say, peace be with you.
Mm-hmm.
He was a bringer, the Prince of Peace, right? So he would bring that kind of peace. And man, if there has ever been a time in our world when people need that inner peace,
Yeah.
we are the anxious generation.
Mm-hmm.
We are we succumb way too easily. Like you caught yourself in a little
Yeah.
doom scroll, right?
Yeah.
You're like,
Right.
wait, maybe I don't want to be here.
Yeah. Right.
Maybe there's another way to spend my morning.
Yes.
And it's important that we still pay attention to what's going on around us. You can't just like stick your head in, a closet and pretend like these really important, hard issues are not going on. Like we must enter in Jesus's way and in his name into the difficult parts of our world. I think that's the hope of Jesus's people as
Mm-hmm.
salt and light in our world. But we have to, I believe, have to be able to go into those spaces grounded,
Mm-hmm.
with our souls at rest, able to hear from God in the midst of our being present to the people and challenges around us. And that capacity for a non-anxious presence, right?
Yes.
That capacity for peace. It cannot be contrived. You cannot fake that.
Yeah. Right.
It's you can sense it when you are with a person who's fundamentally well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Chaos may be going on in their life and in their circumstances, but they are not driven by their circumstances. They are fundamentally well, living in the reality of the kingdom of God.
Yes.
And then they're able to show up with a different kind of energy, a different kind of attitude, a different kind of helpfulness into contentious situations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's Jesus said, in this world, you will have trouble,
Mm-hmm.
but take heart. There's a reality of the kingdom of the heavens that we can align ourselves with, stay connected to, whatever language you want to put around it, that allows us to move about in this world
Mm-hmm.
and experience flourishing inwardly, outwardly. Yeah.
I
Anyway,
love it.
I
Yeah.
love the idea of flourishing.
Yeah.
And
I
I
like,
like that you noticed that this is the kind of the question that the whole book is begging.
mm-hmm.
And it makes me think, I hadn't thought of that in writing it, but I appreciate your observation. And it makes me think, like, isn't that what Jesus says? What do you want me to do for you?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to be well? And there is a piece of us that has to say yes.
Yeah.
The way will open up, but we
Mm.
have to want it. He cares about the inclination of our heart.
Yeah, love that. You say towards the end of the book, you say, these days I find myself noticing the longing for peace. I like that you said that. I like you said noticing the longing. There's just like we all want peace, right? But are we even willing to notice our own longing for such a
Yeah.
thing? And where are we at in even just our desires, right? So
Yeah.
that gets to those questions of Jesus. What do you want? And you said, not just in my circumstances and relationships, but in my very body. So now we're even talking about our own physical bodies, Mindy. You said,
Yep.
I've learned to pay attention to when my body is holding tension, if my forehead is tight or my neck or shoulders are frozen, and my brain may know that it is well with my soul, but no one has told my shoulders inching their way toward my ears. That was really good. I appreciate that. Yeah. We are embodied souls. And
Yes.
so, we
Yes.
always talk about like, how do you know if your soul is well? Well, if you just stop a bit and notice and pay attention to, and I think we do this sometimes in spiritual direction type spaces, breathe, just breathe a little bit and begin to notice what feels tense in you right now. You don't have to judge that or fix that or do anything about it. Just notice. And I like how you're saying, nobody told my shoulders as they're rising up or my tense jaw, right? So I appreciate that. Very
Well, and that was
practical.
even part of my story in the middle of the night last night as we were talking at the beginning. It's like I recognized I had all these thoughts in my head,
Mhm.
and I'm like, all right, no, I want to come to God in prayer, and I just want to remember I'm fundamentally well in a world where God is
Mm.
king, but I would notice I had to, like, oh, my muscles in my back, everything was like,
Mhm.
and it's like
Mhm.
you just have to. I think I wrote about it in there. I'm not sure, but I started I used to start saying, peace be with you to my body.
Yes. Yeah. You did say that in there. I
I,
love it.
I remember the first time I was like, you are crazy, Mindy. But
To your
like,
trapezoids.
I remember driving, and it's like, people, muscles. Like I'm saying this on video. Like, I don't know if you can see this, but I'm like holding my own shoulders here.
Yeah.
And it's like, guys, shoulders. Jesus is king. There is a kingdom. And I feel like my head needs to tell you all,
Mhm.
peace be with you.
Mhm.
Peace be with you. And I think it matters that we say that to each other.
Mhm.
I can't point to any biblical precedent for saying it to your trapezoids, but I found it helpful. I found it
Yeah.
helpful to speak and say, peace be
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think Old Testament and the Psalms, we see the writers actually talking to their souls,
That's
Why
true.
so downcast, oh my
Yeah.
soul? Put your
Yeah.
trust or hope
Put
in
your
God,
hope
which
in
I,
God.
I think
Yeah.
that might be a way of saying peace be with you.
Yeah. I love that.
Interesting question I have, though, or observation, perhaps. You were talking about how this conversation you had last night, you had a lot of things in your head, right? And I'm guessing they were good things, right? You're dreaming, you're allowing yourself to envision maybe what God is doing with
Yep.
Whisper Ranch and the book and soul care and so many other
Yeah.
things. So it strikes me that not everything that's going on in our heads has to be like negative
Oh gosh.
speak.
Yeah.
that would cause us to kind of have this almost anxious kind of
Yep.
sense of being, so it could be
Yeah.
very good things. And I wonder how many leaders that might be listening to today's conversation might be
Yeah.
thinking, well, I always live in that world. I'm
Yep.
always in that world of vision casting. And I assume those are good thoughts, right? So why would you tell me that I need peace in the midst of that? Like, what do you think about that?
That, yeah, the idea of being so consumed with our vision that we could be at deep unrest in our bodies and in our souls. I don't think we at large have been calling that into question of late.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we need to,
Mm.
because I think there's a seduction, and I'll use that word intentionally. There's a seduction in getting obsessed with our visions. And as long as they have a God, purpose at the end of them, or, the kingdom impact and all this stuff, we can get seduced into very unhealthy souls in the name of that vision. Just a couple of times recently, I was at Compassion and a couple other places recently, and I've been pulling out a great quote. It's not in the book, but a great quote from Dallas Willard's essay called "Living in the Vision of God." And in it, he is responding to the question of how is it that so many of these great organizations founded with unbelievable intensity, fire, vision for life in the kingdom, generations, decades, or centuries later, bear no resemblance to the founding ideas. And this essay is phenomenal. I love quoting it, but he talks about when you have a founder or a group of people who come together around this great vision of life in God, and out of that life pours unbelievable great things, because they're abiding. They're this branch and vine thing is happening. God's spirit pours out all over the place. Revivals happen, buildings get built, great things happen. But then people come around that vision who are inspired by the results they see, but don't necessarily connect with the inner fire that brought the whole thing.
Right.
And so you have a place where increasingly Willard's words, the mission becomes the vision.
Mm-hmm.
And we become, and I'll try to just wrap this up quickly, but I think I get just as energized. I mean, you can hear it in my voice. I get so energized about visions and future and what we could do and all that kind of stuff. I find that stuff comes to me quite easily. I enjoy it. It's fun to think about it. I often say I'm not an artist at all. I'm not a creative, but the canvas that I love to think about is the future.
Mm-hmm.
I love to paint. But I can't actually paint, but I like to think about what could be that isn't now.
Yeah.
And how does that glorify God? How does it woo the hearts of people? How does it introduce a new way of being? So I get very energized and activated around that stuff. But I have found that when I get more enamored with the vision than with life with God, I mean, that's kind of the story of my own burnout years ago. It's like I was just so committed to the vision that I lost my own inner life with God. And I didn't have a way of thinking about it, because I was like, as long as I believe all the right things, then what difference does it make? Like, that's the whole game, right?
Right. Right.
So, anyway, yes, in the middle of the night, and many leaders probably like me, like we get super excited about all those things. And we start thinking about the next steps and the emails that need to get sent. And what if we did it this way, if we structured it that way, and this person might want to get involved. And I mean, you can hear it like, and there's nothing wrong with those things.
Yes.
But there is a seduction. And if those things in the middle of the night start interrupting your ability to sleep and then actually show up the next day in a grounded way and do the work, well, then that seduction is beginning to compromise the actual work that you're called to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's hard to say no to. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's for a good cause, Mindy. It's for, right? It's for the best cause of all.
I mean, you and I, yeah. I work with a lot of leaders, as do you. And none of them intend to burn out. The reason they're in ministry is because of this deep life with God that they're serving out of. But these subtle shifts in focus or in what we're even depending on for the outcomes that we care about begin to creep in along the way, and it becomes suffocating. And we don't have a way of detaching from all those great kingdom wins. I mean, literally, this is the language of all this leadership rhetoric often, right? It's like, what are these kingdom wins we're all driving for? And one of the biggest gifts to me in my recovery of burnout years ago, which is, I'm pretty honest about it in the book. I've never really put that much in writing. I came to believe that do you know what is likely the oldest hymn in all of Christian?
Like from the Bible or more recent than the Bible?
More recent, not including the Psalms.
Okay.
Yeah.
No.
Be Thou My Vision.
Okay.
Is likely from like the 600s.
I should know that.
Ireland, something like that. Yeah, you're a worship guy.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know this. I've stumbled into it somehow. I don't remember where, but I've fact checked it, and it is in fact quite likely the case.
Yeah.
And that became an anthem for me in my own recovery, because you're basically saying, God, you be my vision, the Lord of my heart. Don't be anything else to me, not be all else to me, save that thou art, accept that thou art, thou my best thought, by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence is my light.
Yeah.
This is a spiritual formation hymn. Yeah. Be thou my wisdom. You are my best idea. Be thou my wisdom and thou my true word. I don't have anything to say if it's not you. I ever with thee and thou with me, Lord. I mean, it's all about this relational connection.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I just think God welcomes, invites, actually has created the world in such a way that each leader listening, your vision matters.
Yeah.
What God has given you to see, you can see things that no one else can see. You have proximity to people, challenges, opportunities, and it's vital that you can see those things and contend for what matters in those places. Yes, a kingdom win, you could call it that. But it has to be a secondary vision to the vision of God as your source. And when we keep that first order and second order things straight, as C.S. Lewis reminded us, you get both first and second things.
Yes.
But if you put second things first, and those secondary visions are second things, everything that I love and am working for right now, the ranch, soul care, the team, our family, all of those things, I am passionate about all those things and willing to work like a dog, but not beyond what I should. But I don't mind working hard. I love hard work. I think hard work is great. But it has to be balanced with rest, and it has to be not what I'm ultimately relying on. And every single one of those things, they are a secondary vision to life with God. And if life with God necessitates a shift away from any one of those things, I have to, at my soul level, have a prior yes to whatever God is asking.
A soul,
that's scary to say.
A prior yes, a soul level prior yes to whatever God, that has to be done in advance. That's the work.
Yeah. That's the daily surrender. That is the daily work of yielding, of recognizing ourselves as a part of a much bigger story, that God can see the end from the beginning, and we can't.
Okay. Your book. You mentioned already, you detailed probably more authentically, more fully your burnout from years ago in this book. And you massively wove that with something that happened not too long ago.
Yeah.
a very devastating fire here in Colorado that affected you literally. Can you tell our listeners? I want them to listen and read your book, but can
Mm,
you give them a little bit of an insight into
yeah.
just how those two things merged for you?
Right. Well, I've been fairly honest about my story years ago in person in a lot of places, and I've alluded to it in writing, but I just have never written it that much. Um, and that's my history. That's how I came to understand the priority of the care of the soul as a way of life and a completely different um, underpinning to the work I would do in the world.
Mhm,
So that has always been the case. But when those fires raged through our community, well, now about 2.5 years ago, maybe coming up on 3, um, it was the most disrupted my life had been since the vertigo and everything I had
mhm,
had years ago. And praise be to God, when you care for your soul as a way of life, you can handle when really hard things come your
mhm,
way and still maintain that groundedness. Now it's
mhm,
turbulent, it's hard, it's disorienting, but the
mhm.
bottom didn't fall out the way it
Yeah.
had years ago.
Wow.
And so that was like one piece of how I found these stories to be connected to one
Mhm,
another. But then the land itself of our property, the Whisper Ranch, was heavily burned. Many things were destroyed. And I kept finding myself noticing the metaphor.
mhm.
The burnout wasn't just like a theoretical thing. It is like this is a stand of a couple hundred trees that are completely charred and they are
Yeah.
dead and they are never coming back. And there wasn't like at first the reaction was like, oh, we just got to get rid of these. Like we want to get rid of everything that doesn't look fluffy and green and happy
Yeah.
and healthy and flourishing.
Mhm,
And I just sensed a pause in my spirit and this is part of the story then, to like, no, I think these actually are an invitation. These trees have a sacred beauty. It's an aching beauty. It's not like rainbows and butterflies or whatever you think of as a happy version of beauty. This is the ache of things that are gone and never coming back.
mm,
And I wish I could have put pictures in the book, but
mhm,
some of the pictures of these trees they draw you into like a quiet stillness, into a reflection on maybe areas of our own lives that are broken and lost and not coming back.
mhm,
And what does grief look like? What does lament look like? How do we, you know, the even now 2.5 almost 3 years later, the forest is starting to come back to life in some really cool ways. Those trees are never coming back.
mhm,
That is not the end of the story, right? When we experience a complete burnout, flame out, whatever, is not the end of the story. But that might be a chapter that is going to
yeah.
end with some sadness. And how do we allow God to meet us in those painful places,
Mhm,
care for our souls in the midst of that, and then let him lead us wherever is next. So the stories, I don't know if I'm answering your question very well, but the many people who were relating to me at that time and hearing me talk about all this, just because that's just how I am. I'm like chatting about all this stuff with people who would visit. And then I was like, I think this is actually helpful to people.
mhm,
Like people would walk into that burned out grove of trees
mhm,
and I would be chatting about like, hey, this is everything I just said. And I would turn around and, oh, they had tears in their eyes
mhm,
and they were identifying with a part of their story that was maybe burned out, gone, never coming
mhm,
back. And that's when I started to say, oh, maybe it would help people if I could tell these two stories
mhm,
in a way that allowed the tragedy and the heartache and trauma to some extent. Not that, trauma is a big topic, but what was hard about that season with these fires and our neighbors losing their homes. And I mean, it was heavy. But how could I, God, would you help me tell this story in a way? And, Sean and the editors and agents, like so many people came around to say, we want to help you steward these stories so that people can find help. And this is a moment where even 2 years ago is when this whole project started, the book. And there was, me, I'm like, wait, how do we get this out like 6 months from now? Because everybody needs help with this. And sure enough, we still do need help with it. 2 years on.
If you started writing this book 2 years ago and this fire only happened less than 3 years ago, you were still very much affected by by everything about it. Like, so there's still displacement and trying to figure out what to do with your property and where are you moving and your neighbors and everything going on internally. And what you said earlier was that you had done some soul care, some work. That seems fairly evident to me, just in even recognizing that you were able to write and be so just so attuned to like the lessons from the past, and then the hardship of the present, and weaving all that together with God. Like, I just want to affirm what I heard you say in that, because it comes out in the book.
That's exactly what I hope everyone who reads this can sense in their own life. Is no matter how hard your circumstances are, no matter how impossible your situation might seem, you as a person of the kingdom have the ability to connect with the living God. And you will, even in seasons of disruption, not from an overachieving or striving place, you can notice, where is God at work in this? How am I invited into his presence? What is he doing with me right now? And how is that available for the good of his kingdom, his people? Not because you're trying to math all that in your brain, but because you're following, you're yielded. And it's like, think about it. Everyone everywhere who's going through chaos, because our world is a little chaotic right now. What does the living God want to breathe into you that could redeem and restore not only what is going, because we made some big, bold moves that summer that we would never have had the headspace for if we were, spinning. Yeah. And so, yes, there are really hard things. Somebody said to me, I thought your subtitle was going to be when isolation, exhaustion, and burnout get the best of you. But instead, how can isolation, exhaustion, and burnout actually light a path to flourishing? And that's I'm so glad you brought that up, because that, I appreciate you saying that about me, but I want to expand that out, because that's what's available to all of us.
Well, you name in the end of the book scenario Q, and people are going to have to read the book to understand the difference between scenario A, B, C, or Q. But essentially, Q is what happened to you when you weren't expecting it. I liked how you described like the summer before the fire. The fire happened December 30th, 2021.
Yep.
So a lot of people celebrated Christmas together and then went on vacation. In fact, the pastor of the church I was attending was on vacation in another state, and all the stuff that they had, all the presents they opened were at home, and that home went up in flames. And but prior to that, over the summertime, a lot of rain, which meant the grass grew, and then dry conditions in an arid desert. And then lots of time with no moisture, so everything got dry.
Yep.
And then the wind came that day, and then some spark from something had, something out west, and everything, the dust from the dryness was like blowing through the air over 100 miles an hour. What do we do with that landscape of our soul to keep it uh, in a more healthy state, not dry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not not with those kind of conditions. All it would take is a little spark. Do you hear what I'm asking? And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know where you would go with that, but like,
Yeah.
what do we do? Where's the hope for us here?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I do believe there's great hope. There's great hope. My own story, the story of many, many, many people of God throughout history. There is great hope. But I do think one of the things where you started our conversation today is the noticing. I think we sort of silently submit is the word that's coming to mind. It's not exactly the word I want, but we just sort of like give in to whatever our head is thinking about without questioning where we're at. And back to that idea of shalom, one of my favorite things that I learned from actually Tim Mackey, who's the Bible Project guy.
Oh yeah.
I had a chance to present with him at a conference, and the topic of our session was called something about the hope of shalom, the promise of shalom. That's what it was called. And it got into this idea of flourishing, and I brought in the soul health versus soul neglect and all these things. And he told us as part of that event that there's a really unusual term in Hebrew that is from Isaiah 26:3. That is, he, God, will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast, for they trust in him. And Willard would often point to that verse. That has been a key part of my sort of understanding of the potential for the care of the soul connecting to that inner peace.
Mm-hmm.
Because that perfect peace that is translated in most of our English is actually in the Hebrew, shalom, shalom.
Wow.
It is like and it's the only place in the whole Bible that that's used. Wow. It's the perfect version of shalom, shalom, shalom. Yeah. And like, it's like shalom squared, like whatever flourishing is, it's flourishing version of flourishing. It's like we can't imagine it, but it's what our souls long for, right? We long for it.
Yeah.
We rail against the lack of shalom in our lives. And in others and in our world.
That's true.
And I don't mean just interpersonal peace. I mean, we rail against poverty and injustice and things that are wrong.
Yes.
And we long for perfect peace. We long for redemption, restoration. And anyway, the hope of that verse is that God will keep us in that shalom version of shalom. How? With our minds being steadfast because we trust in him. That is not I trusted in Jesus in, 1972 or something, when I was like 2 years, 4 years, 7 years old.
Yes.
This is a practiced way of life of knowing how to rest our souls in God's good care. Yes, we could talk about rest. We need sleep. We need rest. We need ways of taking our foot off the gas pedal and not driving all the time. But fundamentally, our rest is in God. Our care for our soul is in God. And when you talked about at the beginning of our time together, noticing that you had been in this like a little bit of a spiral following this little unnamed topic into an unnamed social media platform, which we've all been there, right?
Yes.
But you noticed, you're like, wait, maybe this isn't what I choose to set my mind on. What am I setting my mind on?
Right.
And it's not like a win-loss game. It's a every moment, every day, how am I returning my mind to rest in God?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I just want to end just quoting you from the end of the book. You say soul care is not an invitation into a list of new things you can do. It's not about engaging in new practices simply to be able to say you do them. It is not simplicity for the sake of simplicity, or solitude for the sake of alone time, or silent prayer for the sake of silent prayer. Soul care gets you ready for this scenario Q, this thing that is coming, right? That we have to be open to what God's up to before you even know it could be an option. And here's where I want to end. Soul care is a way of life that allows you to develop the heart, mind, and spirit to become a person of the kingdom, an active participant with God in the here and now. And I love that. To me, what feels like a beautiful summary of soul care is an invitation to be a participant in the shalom, that God is already kind of up to and about. But there is a way to live life with God that whatever happens, well, I mean, this sounds cliche, but I think it could be true. It is well with my soul.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us. And how do people contact you and find out about what you're doing? We want to make sure that they are connected to you.
Soul care is, as you well know, it's an ancient term. It's the vocation initially of the church. This is what the early church thought of themselves as their work, is the care of souls and the cure of souls. Yeah. And so it's an ancient term. I just happened to snag the URL a long time ago. And have been working with these themes for many years. And so guys, come find us at soulcare.com. We have all kinds of growing, a team of people who are pulling together resources and pathways, practices, guides, spiritual directors, coaches. Really, we're just as a team saying prayerfully, God, how do we give as much lift to this topic in our day as possible? And what does that look like? And right now there's a book, and there's online courses and relationships. You know, our team of spiritual directors meet with pastors and leaders, global missions organizations, like lots of different kinds of people. And we're so privileged to hold that sacred space with leaders, because the well-being of their souls matters. They're called to important things, and it's vital that they can enter into those challenges from a place of health instead of depletion. So anyway, that's what we do. Come find us on social media. We're in Facebook, I think, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And smarter people than me are trying to figure out how we enter into those places in helpful ways. But that's our hope. That's our hope, is to meet people kind of where y'all kind of are right now. And maybe if somebody in the middle of the night is scrolling through stuff and sees an invitation to rest or to consider the well-being of their soul, then that's part of us fulfilling the work we feel called to do.
Right on. Thank you so much, Mindy. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Take good care.
All right. Bye-bye. And thank you, listener, for getting the word out about this podcast. I was in Spain, and I heard people are listening to this from all over the world. I mean, this is amazing. Renovare highlighted the podcast on one of their most recent updates. And so lots of people are finding their way to the Being Formed podcast. So let's keep it going. Until next time, everyone, grace and peace.